This is Evangelist Henry Walker. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. I want to start a new message today talking about how the Father is maneuvering us into our battle positions in these last days in this pre-rapture season. But let's go to Father first in prayer. Father, I thank you for another opportunity to minister to your people, Father. I ask you to use me just the way you want, Father. Let me say only what you want me to say, nothing more and nothing less. Help people, Father, to open up their spirits and not only receive the word, but study the word for themselves. And Father, we give you all the praise and the honor, Father. In the mighty name of Yahshua, by the blood of Yahshua. Go with me to the book of Daniel, chapter 3. Again, we're talking about the Father maneuvering us into our battle positions, that he's prepared us for our whole lives. And it's right now in this end time. You're going to feel his gentle hand maneuvering you. Just flow and follow him. Daniel chapter 3. Daniel's after Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel. Look at Daniel chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar had made an image of gold, and everybody was supposed to bow down to this image. In verse 5, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. You can see how this beast system in the world system, is trying to reach out to influence children by music. Young people by music. And here's exactly what happened. The beast system is trying to usher in this control, maybe little by little, just trying to see how much they can get away with. It's so important for us to stand, and having done all, stand. Stand stronger, stand longer. In verse 6, and whosoever falleth not down and worships shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. All the people heard it and they bowed down. When they heard the music, they bowed down. But then certain Chaldeans said, you made a decree, Nebuchadnezzar, that anybody who doesn't fall down and worship your image shall be cast in the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And there are certain Jews, in verse 12, which thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. It's Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael. I hate the names that they were given, pagan names. These men, O king, have not regarded you, nor they serve not your false Elohims, nor worship the golden image which you have set up. Nebuchadnezzar called Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, and said, you still have an opportunity to bow down when you hear this music. But they said, no, we're not going to bow down to you. We worship that one true Yahweh. And if he delivers us from this fiery furnace, we're still not going to bow down to you. If he doesn't, definitely not going to bow down to you too. So Nebuchadnezzar was really angry. And he set the flames to be 7 times hotter. Maybe that's the way you feel right now. All this pressure coming against you. But stand strong, because greater is he, the Father in you, than anything or anybody in the world. And if he be for you, who can be against you? Nobody. Every tongue that comes against you in judgment, you shall condemn. So they threw him into the fiery furnace. Those who took Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael and put him in the fire, they were killed. The fire is so strong. It doesn't matter how strong the attacks are against you. It doesn't matter how some people in authority, quote unquote, are trying to exercise authority over you. There's only one king, and that's Yahshua, sitting on that throne. One king, Revelation 4:2. One sitting on the throne. That's the Father in Yahshua. He's the king of the universe. Everything was created by him and for him, and by him all things consist. So Nebuchadnezzar was looking at them in the fiery furnace and said, wait, we put 3 of them in there. There's one more. That 4th person is Yahshua, the Father in the body. Yahshua is with you. Whatever is coming against you, he is with you. And the fire will not hurt you. The situation will not hurt you, because he got it all under control. He's the ultimate controller. He's got it all under control. He's the ultimate controller. I have a book on my website at the bottom of my written message page called Is the Trinity Really a Mystery? It explains the Trinity, but also has different titles for the Father in that book to help you to worship him and see how powerful he really is. For instance, I talk about him being our repairer, our controller, our healer. Nebuchadnezzar was so impressed that they were not hurt by this fire. Verse 29, therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the Elohim of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and the houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other Elohim that can deliver after the sort. Then the king promoted Azariah, Hananiah, Mishael in the province of Babylon. See, the Father is maneuvering us into our battle positions that he has ordained for us before the foundation of the world. And it's a position where we'll be most effective for him. See, anything that you have gone through, it builds up your anointing to help somebody else who's gone through that. So he wants to take advantage of what he allowed us to go through to put us in our battle positions, so we are immensely qualified to be there, because we've gone through the same thing that some people are going through right now. Let him have his way. It doesn't matter how long you've been in the wrong place, believing you're serving the Father. Let him take you out of there and put you in the right place. It's never too late. It may be late, but it's never too late. And Daniel chapter 5. So you see, Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael they were positioned right by that statue, the golden statue. An example to everybody that they're not going to worship anybody but Yahweh. And Yahweh backed them up. And they got promoted. And everybody knew that their Elohim, their Yahweh, is the king of the universe. Daniel chapter 5. Belteshazzar had made a great feast to thousands of his leaders. In verse 3, and they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of Elohim, which was at Jerusalem. And the king and his princesses, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine. They praised these false Elohims of silver and brass and iron and wood and stone. In that same hour, the fingers of a man's hand wrote on the wall. This is the same finger that wrote the Ten Commandments on that stone. It's also the same finger that wrote down the sins of the people who wanted to stone the woman taking adultery. The only finger that the Father has is Yahshua. Isaiah 53 says this is the arm of Yahweh. Yahshua is the arm of Yahweh. It talks about him giving up his life for us in Isaiah 53. This is the arm of Yahweh, Yahshua. Some of you may or may not know that we go back to our Jewish roots in Yahshua. We don't go to those ceremonial washings or the 600 and some laws that the Jewish people can't keep. But we go back to what Yahshua taught to the apostles and what the apostles taught to others before Constantine brought his junk, his form of Christianity, to the early believers. And Yahshua is a Jew, was a Jew, always will be a Jew. And we study his feast days. He fulfilled every one of those feast days with the exception of the last three, the fall feasts. Feast of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, or the Day of Atonement, and Tabernacles, or Sukkot. He's born on Passover, died on Passover, circumcised the last day on unleavened bread. He rose on the Feast of First Fruit. All those feast days are contained in my book, Noon, at the bottom of my message page, and it's free. And also I have messages on my website at henrywalker.org on those feast days. I also have messages on those holidays that Constantine brought in. In verse 25, this is the handwriting on the wall. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. He's numbered Belshazzar's kingdom, and he's finished it. It's over. Tekel. He is found weighed in the balances and are found wanting. His kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Upharsin. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. And see, the Father called Daniel to stand in front of Belshazzar and all those people and interpret that handwriting on the wall. And you don't know where he's going to put us. So great where he positions us, a position that he has prepared for us before the foundation of the world, as I mentioned. In verse 29, they then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. And that night he was slain. But the Father still made sure that Daniel got rewarded. Look at chapter 6, Daniel chapter 6, in verse 1. Again, we're talking about being positioned in the right place at the right time. And it's so important in these last days with so much that's happening in the world, so much possible infiltration, possible encroachment on people's lives, especially on the young people. How the people with these crazy, crazy ideas are trying to teach the children at a young age. And as I mentioned on some previous podcasts, it's important for parents to ask, what did you learn in school today? What did these teachers teach you? And if it's something that's against the Father's word, go in to a school board meeting peacefully and object to what they're being taught. See, the children are yours. They're not the school systems. They are your children. It's important as a family that you pray together, go over the word together. And there's such an attack on men, especially to emasculate men, fathers, trying to break down the family structure. But it's the father who's the head of the family as and if he is following Yahweh. And a woman wants to submit to a man that's following Yahweh, they can go over situations together and make a final decision. But the ultimate final decision rests with the father, based on consultation with his wife. And you can see how the world system is trying to break down the family structure. But it's important to strengthen the family structure. That's why it's so important to be in the right place at the right time. We may get a chance to go over later on, but look at Stephen. Stephen was waiting on tables, and people were getting healed and delivered while he was waiting on tables. Then he was positioned right in front of all these religious people, and the Father used him so much, confused them so much, tore apart their doctrine so much that they stoned him. They chewed on him with their teeth and they stoned him. So it's important to make an impression in these last days for Yahweh, to stand up for him and be bold. I'm not saying cause violence, I mean bold in Yahweh, and stand up for what you believe. Stand up for the word, defend the word. And if they're trying to teach children things that are not in the word, stand up against it for Yahweh's sake, your children's sake. In Daniel chapter 6, verse 1, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom. And over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was the first, that the princesses might give a counsel to them, and the king should have no damage. Daniel was preferred above all of them because he had an excellent spirit. He wanted to position him over the whole realm. So the world may not want you to be positioned where the Father wants you to be positioned, but they can't stop you. The world system can't stop you. The beast system can't stop you. The only thing that can stop you is you saying no. And the Father always has a ram in the bush. He'll just use somebody else if you say no. So these presidents and princes wanted to find occasion against Daniel, but the only occasion they could come against him with is his relationship to Elohim, Yahweh. So they convinced Darius to sign an edict against anybody who would try to pray to anybody but him for the next 30 days. And Daniel, with all his boldness, he was positioned right by his window. In verse 10, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being opened in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his Father, as he did aforetime. He didn't let anything or anybody interfere with his walk with the Father, his pace that he had with the Father. And it's important for all of us to stand strong against any possible infiltration, as I mentioned, any possible encroachment on our rights as followers of Yahshua and his word. We're going to get back to the message, but before I do, so many people don't realize that the only way that they were conceived because of the Father, that he's the agent of conception. In every podcast, I pray for the babies in the womb. And some facts just for some people to consider. At around 18 days, the baby in the womb, their heart is beginning to beat. At around 4 months, the baby's heart is pumping about 25 quarts of blood per day. This is a life, not a tissue. And most scientists believe that life begins at conception. The College of Pediatrics believes also that life begins at conception. So we want to pray for the babies in the womb. And Father, I ask you to touch the babies in the womb. I ask you to bring them to a full birth, Father. And we give you all the praise and the honor, Father, in the mighty name of Yeshua, by the blood of Yeshua. And if any of you out there had an abortion, repent. Ask the Father to forgive you and go on and follow him. Back in Daniel chapter 6, talking about being put in our battle positions, maneuvered by the Father into our battle positions. And that's what he's doing right now. These battle positions are positions that he prepared before the foundation of the world. Just obey him and go there. Wherever he sends you, he's going to show up and show out for you. And show what he can do with one person who's obedient to him, totally surrendered to him. So the enemies of Daniel came to the king and said, Daniel's worshiping somebody else other than you. He's praying to somebody else other than you. And the king was close to Daniel. And the king couldn't sleep that night as Daniel was in the lion's den. In verse 22, Daniel said to the king, after the king was looking to see how Daniel was, he said, my Elohim, in verse 22, sent his angel and had shut the lions' mouths, that they had not hurt me, for as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before you, O king, have I done no hurt. There may be people talking against you, trying to stop you, trying to stop the promotion that the Father wants you to have. But they can't stop you. The Father's going to shut their mouths. And everybody that came against Daniel and wanted him in the lion's den, they were thrown in there. And before they hit the ground, the lions ate them, devoured them, because the Father wouldn't let them touch Daniel. Verse 25, then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men tremble and fear before the Elohim of Daniel, for he is the living Elohim, the only Elohim, and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and in the earth, and who had delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. See, the Father wants us to prosper in the natural, but it's all dependent upon our spiritual prospering, our soul prospering. Most of these evangelists on TV, they're interested in, they promote money, 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 name it, claim it, blab it, grab it, without the soul prospering. The Father's not going to give us anything that's going to interfere with our walk with him. And if our soul is not up to the point where we can sustain those blessings, he'll wait until we are, and then he'll give them to us. You need to be in a ministry where they're talking about the Father putting down the flesh. John the Baptist said, I must decrease so he can increase. And don't be in any ministry where they're talking about these Constantine's Christianity, these holidays, and this junk, the Christianity that he formed, which most people believe in because of tradition. Find somebody, study under this ministry. We have 2 podcasts a week. Study into this ministry for a while, and he'll lead you into somebody who is standing on the word only. And don't worry about if the Father calls you to a battle position and he's ministering through you for somebody. Don't worry about any interference. Go with me to Acts chapter 13. See, the Father's putting us in battle positions to win souls for him. That he will win souls to him through us. Just show up. You show up and he'll show out for you. You take care of his business, he'll take care of your business. Remember, Yeshua borrowed that boat off the shore to preach to the people. And after he finished preaching, he said, now you take your boat out for a catch. They had to get another boat. There's so much of a catch. So again, take care of his business and he'll take care of yours. But it's so important right now to allow him to maneuver us into these battle positions. Not something where we want to be, but where he wants us to be, where it will be most effective for him. And that's what the fruit of the Spirit's all about, that as he uses us to minister to people, it's actually like he is ministering through us. The people see Yeshua. All the fruit of the Spirit is about Yeshua. It describes Yeshua: love, joy, peace, longsuffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. In Acts chapter 13, in verse 7, as Paul was going to the island unto Paphos, there's a false prophet who was with the deputy of the country, Sergius Paulus, in verse 7. a prudent man, who called for Barnabas and Saul and desired to hear the word of Elohim. But Elymas, this false prophet, withstood them and tried to turn away the deputy from hearing what Paul had to say. In verse 11, he said to the false prophet, "And now behold, the hand of Yahshua is upon you, and you shall be blind, not seeing the sun for a season." And immediately there fell on him a mist and a darkness, and he went about seeking some to lead him by the hand. Then the deputy, when he saw what was done, believed, and being astonished at the doctrine of Yahshua. See, nothing can stand in the way of the Father using you to minister to people, again, as I said before, except you. Just show up, and he'll show out through you, as I mentioned. Go to 2 Samuel chapter 5 with me. You go back to the beginning, you got Joshua judges Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel chapter 5, talking about being put in a battle position for Yahweh. And watch how he moves through us and protects us and uses us, and how he shows forth his power in and through our lives. When we came to the Father and surrendered everything to the Father, we enlisted in his army, and we belong to him. And it's important to get to our battle positions. In verse 17, 2 Samuel chapter 5, "And when the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines came to seek David. And David heard of it and went down to the hold." He went into the presence of the Father. He's preparing us for our battle positions. But it's important, before the battle, during the battle, and after the battle, we talk to him and worship him. In verse 18, the Philistines also came and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. In verse 19, "And David inquired of Yahweh, saying, Shall I go up to the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into my hand? And Yahweh said unto David, Go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into your hand." David showed up for the battle, and the Father broke forth upon all his enemy. In verse 21, "And he left their images, and David and his men burnt them." Verse 22, "And the Philistines came up yet again and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. And David went to Yahweh again and said, Shall I go up against him? He said, Wait for the sound of the wind going through the mulberry trees. And he did, and the Father led him into battle and defeated them for him. See, remember, the battle is Yahweh's. It's not ours when he puts us in a battle position. But you have some people on a destroyer that are trained to shoot the torpedoes. Some are in the kitchen. Some are shooting machine guns and other weapons. But they've been trained for that. And we have been trained over our lifetimes to be in this battle position in these last days against that world system, against that world control, the world so-called authority. Because the rapture is soon approaching, and right after that is the tribulation. We talked about the digital ID, the digital currency, and how this world system wants to control what people buy or sell. Just like it says in Revelation. It's important that we stand strong right now and get ready for him to come back, but also to help people to get through that door of the rapture before it closes. So the Father went ahead of David. He's our battling ram. Let him go ahead of us and prepare opportunities for him to use us. Let's go to the left to the book of Joshua chapter 10. Joshua replaced Moses, as you know, and Father just told him to stand strong, be strong. He told him, when you go against the enemy, destroy the enemy. Don't leave anything remaining. Joshua chapter 10, verse 40. "So Joshua smote all the country of the hills, and of the south, and of the vale, and of the springs, and all their kings. He left nothing remaining, but utterly destroyed all that breathed, as Yahweh Elohim of Israel commanded." He showed up, and the Father used him. He went into his battle position and showed up. And the Father won the battles for him. If you go to the right to 2 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles chapter 14, talking about a king named Asa in verse 2. He did that which is good and right in the eyes of Yahweh, his Elohim. Isn't it so great that Yahweh is our Yahweh? We belong to him. Totally protected. That's why David could say in Psalm 91, "I dwell in the secret place of the Most High. I abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of Yahweh, he is my refuge and my fortress, my Elohim, in him will I trust. Surely he shall deliver me from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover me with his feathers. Under his wings shall I trust. His truth shall be my shield and buckler. David knew that he's my Elohim. I belong to him. And he's my Elohim. In verse 9, there came an army of 1,000,000 men against Asa. And Asa just showed up for the battle. He went into his battle position in verse 10. In verse 11, he cried unto Yahweh his Elohim and said, Yahweh, it is nothing with you to help, whether with many or with them that have no power. Help us, O Yahweh, our Elohim, for we rest on you, and in your name we go against this multitude. O Yahweh, you are our Elohim. Let not man prevail against you. As a result of what Asa said in verse 12, so, as a result, Yahweh smote the Ethiopians before Asa and before Judah, and the Ethiopians fled. In verse 13, and Asa and the people that were with him pursued them unto Garah, and the Ethiopians were overthrown, that they could not recover themselves, for they were destroyed before Yahweh and before his host, and they carried away very much spoil. So again, we're talking about showing up in our battle positions that the Father has prepared for us before the foundation of the world, and be used by him in these last days to bring more and more people to the door of the rapture. Now, as I mentioned in every podcast, if your flesh is giving you some anxious thoughts, worried thoughts, impure thoughts, say out loud, Yahshua, I thank you for the crown of thorns on your head. That means my mind is protected by your blood, and I only think your thoughts. And I reject these thoughts. And Father, I give these thoughts to you. It's so important. So if any of you have any praise reports, any questions, and you want to email me, you can email me at contact, C-O-N-T-A-C-T, at henrywalker.org. I'll be so glad to hear from you. And if you enjoy these podcasts, tell others about these podcasts, share, subscribe, hit the like button, and remember to next time. This is Evangelist Henry Walker saying, greater is the Father in you, your daddy, the King of the universe, than anything or anybody in the world.